The proud father. Major Marcus. Mark. Holiday adjusted the starched collar of his dress blues as he stepped onto the manicured campus lawn of Fort Bragg's auditorium, where his son's high school graduation ceremony would take place. The mid-morning sun gleamed off the brass buttons down the front of his tunic, tossing little highlights across every fold of deep navy wool. Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying the flutter in his chest. Pride, anticipation, and, beneath it all, the unshakable weight of recent deployments tugging at him. He'd missed countless birthdays, holidays, deployments, redeployments, and even the birth of his younger daughter. But today, he would see his 12-year-old son, Ethan, stride across that stage in his cap and gown, accept his diploma, and take that first triumphant step into adulthood. It was the moment Marcus lived for. The crowd swelled behind him. Families clutching programs, proud grandparents flashing cameras, endless rows of folding chairs lined up in precise military formation. The towering oaks lining the path from the parking lot cast dappled patterns across the grass, and the white marble rotunda at the rear of the building glinted like a promise of tradition. Yet as Marcus made his way toward the entrance, two uniformed guards stepped into view. Stern-faced, ashen-vested base security personnel, guns holstered at their hips. One carried a clipboard. The other stood with arms crossed, gaze fixed like a hawk. "Sir," the taller guard said without preamble, voice clipped. "You can't enter here in uniform." Marcus paused, glance drifting down to the glittering medals adorning his chest. The silver star earned in Fallujah, the purple heart from that roadside IED. "Pardon me?" he replied evenly, planting a hand at his hip. "You need to remove the uniform or stand to the side," the guard repeated, tone flat. "Graduation ceremonies are civilian events. No active duty uniforms allowed." A hush rippled through the families nearby. Marcus pressed his back straight, fists curling within the gloves that bore the insignia of his rank. "My son is graduating today," he requested. "I'm sorry, sir," the second guard interjected, "but that's base protocol. Please, step aside." His mouth tightened into a thin line. Marcus met their eyes squarely. "With all due respect, gentlemen, I'm Major Holiday, commanding officer of Echo Company. My son asked me to walk him across the stage in my uniform. I'll not dishonor him or my service." The clipboard guard lifted his eyebrows, glancing at a laminated sheet. "Your request isn't on the list. Only civilian attire." The word struck Marcus like a physical blow. The standing crowd grew restless. Murmurs whispered astonishment. The base guards, both white men in their early 50s, exchanged a look as though they saw beneath Marcus's uniform to some unspoken transgression. The air crackled. Then Ethan Holiday, tall for his age, and already with the soldier's posture instilled in him at birth, rounded a side row, cap tilted slightly over keen brown eyes. He skidded to a halt beside his father. "Dad?" Ethan's voice trembled. He fumbled with his diploma folder. "They said you have to take off your uniform. They want you to go sit over there." He pointed to a grassy patch roped off for overflow. Marcus drew in a deep breath, hating the hurt gathering in his son's eyes. "It's okay, buddy," he said softly, crouching to eye level. "It's just a rule. I'll watch you from there." Ethan's lips pressed together. "But I wanted you by my side." A nearby mother clutched her baby daughter, staring at the exchange in disbelief. An elderly veteran in a wheelchair wheeled closer, white hair gleaming in sunlight, muttering, "This can't be right." Even the ROTC cadets in their crisp uniforms, lined up like statues at the front, shifted uncomfortably. Marcus rose. "Stand guard there if you must," he told the two men, voice low but unwavering. "But you're looking at the wrong uniform. This one doesn't come off until my son's with me." He ran a gloved hand over the silver service star pinned at his throat, a talisman of sacrifice, of duty. "I'll step back, but I'll be watching." With that, he turned on his heel and walked to the grassy patch, shoulders squared, chin held high. As Marcus took his place in the overflow area, Ethan exhaled a shaky breath, smoothing his gown. Shadows lengthened across the lawn as the ceremony commenced. The base commander's words droned on about achievement and commitment. The ROTC color guard snapped rifles in salute, flags fluttering in the breeze. Marcus watched from the grass, proud but wounded, his uniform gleaming like a beacon, visible proof of the irony. A decorated Marine told he didn't belong on his own son's graduation grounds. At the front, wounded warriors on prosthetic legs saluted the flag. Mothers wept gently as their sons and daughters processed past. One by one, the graduates crossed the stage under the rotunda arch and shook the principal's hand. But when Ethan's name was called, the rotunda doors burst open, and 6 men in black tactical gear stormed through. Each SEAL operator moved with precision, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, navy blue coveralls emblazoned with the trident symbol. Gasps echoed through the crowd as they formed a silent phalanx at the center of the lawn, parting the sea of civilians and uniformed ROTC cadets alike. Marcus's heart thundered in his chest. The SEALs knelt. The front 2 faced the guards flanking the auditorium entrance, weapons holstered, but presence commanding. In that instant, the wind seemed to drop. The world narrowed to the 6 disciplined silhouettes and the rigid posture of the base guards. Ethan froze in mid-step, diploma folder dangling from his fingertips. Shouts rose behind. Some parents stood to see, others dove for cover. The graduation ceremony halted as one, like the snapping of a giant pause button. The base commander barked orders into a radio, but no one moved. The SEAL's unwavering stance spoke louder than any command. Marcus rose from the grass, every eye on him. He straightened his tunic, the metals catching the afternoon sun. Slowly, deliberately, he walked through the gap forged by the SEALs, each footfall reverberating like a drumbeat. The guards stood motionless, frozen by shock, recognition, or fear. There was no shout, no resistance. A silent understanding settled over the assembled crowd. This Marine would not be turned away. When Marcus reached Ethan's side, he knelt, pulling his son into a tight embrace. Diploma in hand, Ethan beamed. The hush broke into thunderous applause as mothers cheered, fathers whooped, and cadets snapped to attention in salute. The base commander, face battered by embarrassment, strode forward and snapped a salute to Marcus and the SEALs. The 6 operators returned it, their mirrored sunglasses reflecting the roaring crowd. Marcus rose, ruffling Ethan's hair. "Let's finish this," he said, voice warm. Ethan tucked under his arm, and together they marched toward the stage, their rightful place. While the 6 SEALs melted back into the shadows, their mission of justice complete. A father's legacy. The moment Marcus and Ethan stepped onto the stage, the auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. Families sprang from their seats, cameras flashing like stars bursting in a night sky. Ethan's cap perched neatly atop his head as he gripped his diploma folder, a smile so wide it threatened to split his face. Marcus, still resplendent in his uniform, stood tall behind his son, the medals on his chest reflecting the lights overhead. For a heartbeat, everything felt right. Every injustice, every hurtful protocol, every lingering question of belonging washed away in that roar of approval. As Ethan crossed the stage to shake the principal's hand, Marcus allowed himself a flicker of pride that ran deeper than muscle memory or rank. He remembered the day his own father, a World War II veteran, marched him onto his first Little League field, short trousers and a batting helmet too large, feeling forever protected by his dad's steady frame. Now, decades later, Marcus passed that legacy forward. When Ethan returned to his side, the two embraced, and for just a moment the whole world seemed to bend its focus on them. The base commander, flushed with embarrassment, stepped forward. His chestnut hair, normally immaculately parted, stuck out at odd angles, betraying his inner turmoil. Slowly, he raised a hand in salute. Marcus returned it, impeccable discipline overriding any bitterness. The commander cleared his throat, voice cracking under pressure. "Major Holiday," he began, "on behalf of Fort Bragg, my apologies for the misunderstanding. Congratulations to you and your son." Ethan offered his father a look of triumphant relief. In that glance, Marcus understood he had done more than secure a place on the stage. He'd cemented his son's faith in justice, however belated. Behind the stage curtains, as the cadets prepared to exit, murmurs rippled through the ranks. Cadet Ramirez, pale-faced, leaned toward his friend whispering, "Did you see those SEALs?" His friend nodded, eyes wide. Never seen anything like it, straight out of a movie. The two slipped from formation, already retelling the story to anyone who would listen. Word spread faster than wildfire. 6 silent warriors, guns holstered but authority absolute, had arrived to defend a Marine father. In minutes, what began as a family crisis had become legend among the young soldiers in training. Outside the auditorium, a photographer crouched low, aiming his telephoto lens at Marcus and Ethan as they walked toward the parking lot. He snapped frame after frame. Marcus's steady stride, Ethan's jubilant grin, the 6 SEALs drifting away like ghosts into shadowed doorways. That night, the base newspaper's front page carried the headline, "SEALs Protect Marines' Right to Honor Son." By dawn, the story had rippled into regional media, a portrait of loyalty and legacy that resonated beyond Fort Bragg's gates. Back at home in Wilmington, North Carolina, Marcus's wife, Lieutenant Commander Elaine Holliday, greeted her men with hugs and laughter as they arrived. Their 13-year-old daughter, Sophia, tossed her arms around her brother, peppering him with questions. "Did Dad almost miss it? Were you scared? Tell me everything." In the glow of the family room, the pictures of past deployments lining the walls like silent testimonies, Marcus sank into the sofa, Ethan at his side and Sophia perched on his knee. He relived every second, recounting how the guards had tried to stop him, how he'd refused to yield, and how 6 SEALs had turned the tide without firing a shot. Ethan leaned against his father's shoulder. "I didn't know what to think when they came through," he admitted. "Then I saw their tridents. My school's mascot is a trident. I knew they were on our side." Marcus smiled, smoothing Ethan's hair. He explained that the SEAL insignia was no accident, the symbol of the operator's creed, forged in trials harder than any guardhouse dispute. "You stood your ground," Marcus said quietly. "That's what a Marine does, for his country, his family, and his honor." As the evening wore on, the Hollidays gathered around the dinner table, plates heaped with mashed potatoes, green beans, and roast chicken. The local news flickered on the TV, showing clips from the ceremony. The stunned guards, the masked SEALs, the salute that said more than words ever could. Elaine reached across the table, taking Marcus's hand. "Your father would be proud," she said softly. Marcus nodded, remembering his own father's gravely whispered advice. A Holliday never turns away a son in his moment of triumph. He realized that lesson, passed down through generations, had defined him more than any uniform or medal ever could. Late into the night, Marcus traced the raised edges of his service star, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingertip. He thought of the men and women he had led into danger, of the battles won and lost, of the vows taken on distant shores. But none of that compared to the solemn promise he had kept today, to stand by his son, in every sense, at his most important moment. That unbreakable bond, father to son, was the truest measure of a warrior. In the quiet hours before dawn, Marcus lay awake in his childhood bedroom, now repurposed into Ethan's study. He watched the moonlight pool across the desk where Ethan's textbooks lay open, dreaming of future victories. He whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for safety, unity, and justice. In the distance, somewhere beyond the hush of night, the gentle lapping of the Cape Fear River reminded him that life, like water, finds its course around every obstacle. When morning broke, the air would carry new challenges, briefings, deployments, a world still at war. But right now, in this stillness, Marcus held fast to one truth. A father's love endures beyond every protocol, every order, every unjust barrier. In honoring his son today, he had honored all who serve. And as the first rays of sunrise glinted off his service star, he understood that this legacy would guide Ethan long after the medals were packed away. Rippling reverberations, dawn broke over Fort Bragg like a promise reawakened, pale light filtering through the pines to cast long, cool shadows across the parade grounds. Major Marcus Holliday lay awake before Reveille, mind crowded with fragments of yesterday's triumph. 2 stern-faced guards blocking his path, 6 SEALs parting the crowd, the hush before thunderous applause. In the hush of his quarters, he unbuttoned his dress blues and dressed instead in civilian attire, choosing a crisp white shirt and navy slacks. Though his medals lay safely in their display box, the weight of duty clung to him still. By mid-morning, he navigated the gleaming corridors of the headquarters building, where polished marble floors reflected the faces of officers passing in tight patrols. Colonel Avery stood at the end of a long mahogany table, brows furrowed, beside General Rogers, whose impartial visage betrayed a flicker of impatience. The room smelled of coffee and thick briefing folders. 2 base security guards sat off to the side, eyes cast downward, uniforms crisp yet somehow diminished under the weight of scrutiny. As Marcus entered, heads snapped up in disciplined unison. "Major Holliday," General Rogers began, voice practiced but taut. "Thank you for coming on short notice." He slid a stack of paperwork across the table, the top sheet bearing the words, Uniform Regulations Review. Yesterday's events raised questions regarding uniform protocol and base security procedures. Our objective today is clarity, accountability, and ensuring respect for all service members and their families. The guards, both in their early 50s and armed with clipboard authority, shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat, voice barely audible. "Sir, uniforms in civilian events. Policy indicates plain clothes only." He tapped the clipboard as if it were a defense. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "I understand the policy, but my son invited me to walk with him in uniform. That gesture carries meaning, an emblem of sacrifice and pride. I stand by what I did." A hush settled over the table. Colonel Avery exchanged a glance with Rogers. "We will interview the involved personnel," Avery said. "Training manuals will be updated, and sensitivity sessions scheduled. Major, your recommendation?" Marcus paused, tone even. "I recommend mandatory briefings on diversity, equity, and inclusion for all security staff. We owe it to every uniformed service member to feel honored, never unwelcome, when supporting family." He lifted his gaze, steady. "I also request these individuals receive mentorship rather than immediate dismissal. They acted out of ignorance, not malice." General Rogers inclined his head. "Noted. We'll incorporate your suggestions. Expect an official debrief on Friday." The meeting adjourned with brisk salutes. Outside, the guards remained seated, faces pale, yet relieved. One whispered to the other, barely comprehensible, "I never meant disrespect." The other nodded, voice thick. "Something's changed. We'll learn it right." Word of the review leaked swiftly, amplified by duty calls and social media threads. Soon, Bar Honorary Father and Family First trended on military networks. Veterans groups lauded Holliday's leadership off-duty as well as on, while local civil rights organizations applauded the swift action to address bias. The Wilmington NAACP chapter issued a press release praising Fort Bragg's responsiveness and advocating continued cultural competency training. Marcus's morning briefings expanded beyond base boundaries, fostering dialogue between civilians and service members, a bridge built from one family's struggle. At Wilmington High School, Ethan navigated bustling hallways, diploma folder underarm and shoulders straight with newfound confidence. Classmates stopped him in passing, recounting the SEAL's arrival, the salutes, the roar of applause. Friends peppered him with questions. "Did you see Major Holliday walk on stage? Were the guards scared? Will your dad speak at graduation next year?" Teachers offered congratulations between lessons, some referring to yesterday's headlines. Ethan answered with quiet gratitude, humbled that his father's stand had resonated so widely. Meanwhile, 13-year-old Sophia set up her phone tripod in the living room to host an impromptu live stream. She'd already interviewed her grandfather, a decorated World War II vet, about the parallels between yesterday's events and his own experiences. Now she turned to Elaine and Marcus, asking about next steps. Elaine leaned forward, articulate and poised. "We'll work with base leadership to develop training that ensures respect for every service member and their families," she explained. Marcus nodded, adding, "Change begins when we acknowledge mistakes and commit to growth." By early afternoon, a regional journalist arrived on the Holliday front lawn, camera crew in tow. Under the fluttering American flag, Marcus and Elaine stood together in civilian dress, flanked by Ethan and Sophia. The reporter's questions probed deeper. How did you feel when the guards stopped you? What do you hope others learn from this? Marcus responded with clarity born of experience. Pride in service extends beyond uniforms. It's about heart, sacrifice, and family. If one Marine felt unwelcome that day, then training must evolve. Our strength lies in unity, civilian and military alike. When asked about the 6 SEALs, Marcus paused, respect flickering in his eyes. They didn't need to act. Their presence conveyed more power than any weapon. They reminded us that honor transcends orders. I'm grateful they stood alongside me. As dusk approached, Marcus retreated to his study where journals and medals found equal place. He sat at the oak desk, lit by a single desk lamp, and opened a fresh page. Ink traced lines of reflection, gratitude for support received, hopes for systemic improvement, and even empathy for the 2 guards under review. He penned a request that they be allowed to attend sensitivity training alongside him, not punished, but educated. He underlined the phrase, "Forgiveness fosters growth," and paused, considering the weight of those 10 words. Outside, the evening breeze carried cricket songs and the faint hum of distant traffic. Marcus rose, gently closing the journal and placing it beside his service ribbons. He stood before the display case housing medals earned under fire, recalling each foray, each sacrifice. Yet none stirred him like watching Ethan walk across that stage in his uniform, 2 generations bound by courage and conviction. Before turning out the lamp, he whispered a vow to the darkness. I will guard my son's honor, as I guard this nation's freedoms. In the quiet, the promise resonated like a roll call answered. The night enveloped him, but in his heart, a fire burned bright. One born of family, forged in service, and destined to ripple outward beyond Fort Bragg's gates. Chains of change. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of Captain Reynolds's office as Major Marcus Holliday stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing out the distant hum of the corridors and ensuring privacy for what might be the most important conversation Fort Bragg had hosted in decades. 2 base security officers sat across from Colonel Avery and General Rogers, their faces drawn and uniforms sharp, yet diminished by the weight of recent events. Marcus opened his notebook, not as an adversary, but as an ally focused on healing divisions and fostering respect. Gentlemen, Marcus began, voice calm and resolute. We gather today, not to cast blame, but to transform. He allowed a moment of silence before continuing. Yesterday, boundaries were crossed and a father was made to feel unwelcome on his son's special day. Our goal now is to ensure it never happens again. The younger guard swallowed hard. Sir, I realize now how wrong I was. I didn't consider the hurt caused. Marcus nodded, his expression steady. Acknowledgement is the first step toward change. Colonel Avery then unfolded a detailed schedule on the mahogany table. We are launching weekly workshops on implicit bias, he said, tapping a printed agenda. Each session will be co-led by civilian experts and service members of color. Role-playing exercises and small group discussions will drive honest engagement. Attendance won't suffice. Active participation is mandatory. Marcus leaned in, adding, we should enrich our curriculum with historical case studies of integration and diversity within the armed forces to contextualize the learning and demonstrate our shared heritage. By mid-afternoon, the inaugural workshop convened in the community center's auditorium. The 2 security officers took seats in the front row alongside Marcus and a dozen enlisted volunteers. Dr. Simone Simmons, a sociologist specializing in military culture, welcomed attendees with warmth and authority. She guided the group through a scenario in which a parent in civilian clothing questioned a veteran's presence at a ceremony. Participants unpacked underlying questions. Whose comfort was prioritized? Whose history was marginalized? How might we ensure all voices are honored? During a break, Sergeant Alvarez, a first-generation Mexican-American veteran, stood to share his own story. He had once overheard colleagues joking that his promotion was a token gesture, and the sting of doubt had lingered long after. The guards listened intently, empathy in their expressions, as Alvarez described how meaningful inclusion and recognition reaffirmed his sense of belonging. One guard then asked softly, "What tangible actions can demonstrate respect?" Alvarez suggested visible reminders of battlefield sacrifice, plaques, memorial events, and integrated ceremonies to embed respect in both word and deed. Meanwhile, the base chapel courtyard buzzed with anticipation for the community gathering. Rows of folding chairs faced a raised stage draped in red, white, and blue bunting. Local news crews adjusted cameras, and banner slogans proclaimed, "Honor all who serve," and "Unity in service." Marcus took the podium with deliberate confidence. He recounted the graduation incident not as an affront, but as an opportunity. "By addressing our mistakes transparently and swiftly, we demonstrate our values through concrete action and visible respect," he declared, voice ringing across the courtyard. Behind him, the 6 SEALs remained motionless, their silent presence underscoring that solidarity transcends chains of command. After Marcus finished, community leaders from the NAACP and the chaplain's office joined him on stage. Chaplain Monroe offered a prayer for understanding and unity. Ms. Douglas, a retired teacher, recounted her experience integrating schools in the 1960s. Her voice caught with emotion as she described walking into classrooms where suspicion greeted her family's name. She concluded, "We built bridges one courageous step at a time, bridging divides in small, meaningful ways." Following the formal remarks, attendees mingled over coffee and homemade treats beneath the shade of oak trees. Captain Reynolds spoke thoughtfully with a Gold Star mother, offering his gratitude for her family's sacrifice. A local florist contributed vibrant bouquets bearing tags that read, "Thank you," and "Welcome." Children raced around picnic tables, sharing stories of their parents' service branches. The 2 former guards moved quietly through the crowd, offering sincere apologies and letters of commitment, earning nods of acceptance that felt heavier than any apology alone. Returning to his quarters that evening, Marcus settled at his desk overlooking the parade grounds. He slid open a letter addressed to Defense Headquarters. In the first paragraph, he detailed Fort Bragg's swift corrective actions. In the second, he recommended mandatory bias training across all major Army installations, co-developed with military families from diverse backgrounds. He also highlighted measurable outcomes already visible: increased attendance in training, broader representation in voluntary mentorship pairs, and deeper community engagement. A week later, Marcus received an email from the Acting Secretary of the Army, commending Fort Bragg's initiative. The message praised the base for setting a model of accountability and inclusion. He printed the note and pinned it beside his awards case as a quiet reminder of progress. Just as Marcus closed the letter folder, a firm knock sounded at his door. The 2 security officers entered, carrying a neatly bound binder filled with feedback and proposals for future workshops. "Major, we compiled recommendations and drafted outlines for ongoing training modules," one said earnestly. The other offered a steady handshake. "We want to help this effort succeed." Marcus stood and accepted the binder, clasping their hands in turn. "Your dedication exemplifies true leadership. Together, we will continue building an inclusive force." Night had fallen, and the lampposts lining the base roads glowed softly amid the pines. Marcus stepped onto his balcony with a cup of tea, inhaling the crisp scent of pine and dew. In the distance, Ethan and Sophia laughed as they chased their Labrador puppy across the yard, their silhouettes dancing in the twilight. He resolved to invite his fellow brigade commanders to witness these sessions firsthand, believing that seeing transformation in action would inspire similar initiatives nationwide. He imagined Ethan and Sophia growing up in a community where fairness was a right, not a privilege. That vision settled into his heart like steel in the forge, enduring, transformative, unbreakable. The wider battle. When news of Fort Bragg's landmark bias training and community forums reached the Pentagon, reactions ranged from cautious optimism to outright skepticism. Major Marcus Holliday sat at his desk, eyes scanning the urgent memorandums piling up each morning. Invitations to speak at interbranch conferences, requests for policy briefings, calls for expanding the pilot program to multiple installations. Yet beneath these official overtures lay the deeper struggle, the challenge of transforming attitudes hardened by years of unquestioned tradition. Widely circulated military blog posts praised Fort Bragg's swift action, while other commentators questioned whether such measures undermined discipline. Marcus understood both perspectives. Discipline and unity remained the core of service, but unity demanded respect and inclusion, not blind adherence to outdated norms. One afternoon, Marcus addressed a packed auditorium at the Army War College in Carlisle. Generals, colonels, and senior NCOs filled the seats, waiting to hear how a single incident at a graduation ceremony had sparked a movement. On stage beside him stood Master Chief Petty Officer Daniels, representing the SEAL community. Together they recounted how solidarity and silent resolve protected a Marine and reaffirmed shared values. The audience listened with measured attention, some nodding in agreement, others crossing their arms in guarded contemplation. Afterward, in the back corridor, Colonel Peters approached Marcus with a stiff greeting. Peters had served 3 decades, earned silver oak clusters, and prided himself on unblemished adherence to the uniform code. "Major Holliday," he began, voice gruff, "I respect your service record. But am I to understand that every base family event will now require bias workshops? Does this not distract from readiness?" Marcus met Peters's gaze evenly. "Colonel, these workshops complement readiness. A team that trusts one another, that sees every member as valued, fights stronger, and recovers faster. If we lose morale because someone felt unwelcome, our cohesion suffers. We owe it to our people to cultivate respect, as vigorously as tactical proficiency." Peters ground his teeth, hesitated, then nodded curtly. "I'll reserve judgment until I see results." Returning to Fort Bragg, Marcus convened a gathering of brigade commanders and senior enlisted leaders. He presented data from post-training surveys showing a 40% increase in personnel reporting confidence in secure environments, a 50% drop in complaints of disrespectful conduct, and a near-universal desire for continued dialogue. Yet some commanders remained lukewarm. They valued metrics but questioned their relevance on the battlefield. One colonel muttered, "Bullets don't care if my team did a workshop." Marcus held his ground. "Bullets also don't discriminate who picks them up. Our strength lies in unity. Every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine willing to rely on each other regardless of background. That trust is forged not just in combat drills but in daily respect." Late that evening, as Marcus returned home, he found Ethan hunched over a laptop in his study. The teenager looked up, pride lighting his face. "Dad, I entered an essay contest," Ethan said, pushing the screen toward him. "It's about leadership and inclusion. I wrote about Fort Bragg's efforts." Marcus read the first lines. "Leadership begins when one person decides to listen." He smiled. "Son, that's powerful." Ethan's eyes glowed. "They want to publish the top entries on the school website." Marcus felt a surge of hope. The lessons extended even to the next generation. But not all battles followed straightforward lines. A prominent retired general published an op-ed in a leading newspaper, arguing that the military must preserve traditions without succumbing to social agendas. The article ignited fierce response, reviving debates on uniforms, discipline, and cultural shifts. Some quotes mischaracterized Fort Bragg's policies as punitive and divisive, suggesting punishments for minor infractions. Late one Saturday, Marcus's phone buzzed with an anonymous threat delivered via voicemail. "Stop forcing your workshops. You'll regret turning our military into a social experiment." His heart pounded as he replayed the message. Elaine, standing beside him in civilian clothes, placed her hand on his shoulder. "Ignore it," she urged. "Threats come from fear. We won't let fear stop progress." Instead, Marcus forwarded the threat to base security and increased protective details. He refused to be cowed. Within days, the media caught wind of the threat and reported how he faced intimidation with steadfast resolve. Public support surged, drawing attention to the initiative's importance. By month's end, senior leaders at the Department of Defense approved funding to expand bias training across all major installations, mandating integrated sessions for every service branch. The announcement landed just as Base Command rolled out version 2 of the curriculum, featuring cross-cultural modules, historical vignettes, and scenario-based assessments. On the day the new protocol launched, Marcus and his team gathered at dawn in the community center. Representatives from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard assembled in one room. A portrait of joint cooperation. As the first session commenced, he watched admiration and trepidation mingling on participants' faces. He recalled the hallowed ground of his son's graduation, where solidarity forged an unforgettable moment. Now, that solidarity stretched across service lines, uniting diverse communities under shared purpose. Marcus steadied himself, knowing the wider battle for hearts and minds was far from over. Yet every workshop, every open dialogue, every essay contest entry, and every public endorsement fortified the truth that a military built on respect endures unshakable in the face of every threat. As the sun climbed higher, he felt the promise of transformation. The collective resolve of countless individuals dedicated to forging a force where honor, inclusion, and courage marched forward together. In the weeks that followed, Marcus received letters from across the nation, from veteran groups and military families to school children, commending the bold initiative. Each message, handwritten, reminded him that true leadership inspires others. He pinned the most heartfelt letters to his office bulletin board, creating a tapestry of hope and resolve. When he gazed upon them, he saw not policy or politics, but faces of those who steadfastly believed in a more inclusive force. That belief would carry the mission forward. Together we stand. Early morning mist curled around the edges of Fort Bragg's training fields, as service members from every branch across the base gathered for the first ever joint inclusion exercise. Rows of olive drab, navy blue, desert tan, and forest green uniforms stood side by side beneath crisp banners reading, "Respect, Honor, Unity." Major Marcus Holliday watched from the raised platform, heart swelling at the sight of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen sharing coffee and quiet conversation before the day began. The ceremonial bugle sounded, and all snapped to attention, saluting as one force. Colonel Avery stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Today," he began, voice carrying across the ranks, "we build on what we started, an unbreakable bond of mutual respect. We stand together not just as service members but as a family, embracing our differences and united in purpose." Applause rippled through the crowd. Marcus glanced at the 6 SEALs, now integrated as facilitators rather than silent guardians. Their mirrored sunglasses gave way to open expressions as they saluted alongside the other leaders. The morning's first segment paired participants into cross-branch teams, each tasked with navigating an obstacle course in full gear. Private First Class Nguyen, an Army medic, found herself paired with Lieutenant Daniels from the Navy. As they crawled under barbed wire nets, they exchanged stories of hometowns, New Orleans, Houston, and Seattle, discovering shared loves for spicy food and Sunday family dinners. When a heavier wrecking ball obstacle stalled them, Marcus himself joined, hoisting the ball aside so they could continue. Laughter broke tension, and Nguyen later remarked, "I never knew the Marine Corps emblem had such history until he told me." Next came the cultural exchange station. Groups rotated through tables showcasing uniforms, customs, and historical artifacts from each service. Seaman Recruit Carter demonstrated knot tying alongside Corporal Reyes, while Air Force Technical Sergeant Hobbs showed maintenance diagrams to intrigued Marines. At Marcus's table, he displayed family photographs alongside his medals, recounting how hearing his daughter's laughter through video calls sustained him in the desert. A Coast Guardsman whose tears shimmered in the sun thanked him for valuing family moments, saying, "That story gave me strength." By midday, participants gathered under canvas shelters for lunch, sharing MREs and chow hall plates. A local food truck served barbecue sandwiches, smoky, tender, and a hit across the ranks. Conversations blossomed. Navy corpsmen asked Marines about amphibious operations. Army engineers quizzed airmen on aircraft maintenance. A Coast Guard petty officer joked with a Cav scout about riverine patrols. The shared meal underscored the simple truth. Though uniforms and missions differ, the human need for connection remains the same. After lunch, the day shifted to facilitated dialogue sessions. Dr. Simone Simmons guided groups through scenarios drawn from real incidents, microaggressions in barracks, misunderstandings at base events, and clashes over customs. In one circle, Sergeant Alvarez described hosting a Thanksgiving potluck that saw equal parts turkey, tamales, and egg foo young, symbolizing unity in diversity. As he spoke, silence stretched. Then officers and enlisted alike nodded, reflecting on ways to adapt traditions to be more inclusive. One poignant moment came when Captain Reynolds, the base security lead, stood and recounted his family's immigrant journey. He admitted initial resistance to the training, confessing, "I thought it was pointless, until I heard how small insults cut deeper than any battlefield wound." His vulnerability drew applause and fostered collective honesty, the invisible divide between them and us dissolving in shared understanding. Later, as twilight settled over the base, Marcus joined his family on the patio of their home just inside the gate. Ethan and Sophia ran choreographed drills learned from different units, a Marine close-order drill paired with Air Force precision movements, laughing when they stumbled. Elaine poured iced tea as cicadas buzzed overhead. Marcus closed his eyes, listening to the harmony of voices, feeling how far they'd come since that fraught morning on the graduation lawn. That night, as he laid out his dress blues in preparation for tomorrow's salute to the joint exercise, he reflected on the arc of a single act of inclusion. A simple stand at a ceremony had grown into a movement that reached across branches and generations. In the quiet glow of the evening, Marcus understood that this chapter, like every other, hinged on one decision: to see another as family, to honor their service with respect, and to stand together, unbreakable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, he carried the certainty that unity forged in empathy would light the way. Chapter 7. Fire and Fidelity. Early one crisp autumn morning, a call came through the command center. At Fort Liberty, a neighboring installation, an altercation had erupted during the annual Family Day celebration. A civilian contractor had parked in a spot reserved for attending veterans, triggering a heated exchange. Video clips circulated of the contractor shouting racial epithets at a retired African-American colonel. The base commander, apprehensive that the incident might inflame broader discord, reached out to Fort Bragg's Inclusion Task Force, specifically to the man whose stand at his son's graduation had become emblematic of equity under fire. Major Marcus Holliday accepted immediately, believing true leadership required engagement wherever injustice emerged. Within hours, Marcus assembled a team and boarded a military transport to Fort Liberty. Alongside him rode 2 senior SEALs, Petty Officer Daniels and Chief Solomon, along with staff from the Diversity and Inclusion Office. During the journey, Marcus outlined their approach: observe procedures, confer with local leadership, engage witnesses, and host a dialogue forum. When the convoy rolled onto Fort Liberty's sprawling parade grounds, the crisp air carried an undercurrent of unease. Flags fluttered over white gates as families trickled in for softball games and carnival rides. Marcus stepped onto the asphalt with firm resolve, greeting the acting commander, Colonel Beaumont, whose uniform bore the crease of fatigue and concern. In the makeshift command tent, Beaumont recounted the aftermath: social media outrage, fractious debates over protocol, and rumors of retaliation. Marcus listened intently, then proposed convening an open forum under the pavilion where the incident had occurred. Beaumont hesitated, fearful that gathering offended parties might reignite hostilities. Marcus assured him, structured conversation guided by trained facilitators could transform chaos into consensus. Together, they revised the day's schedule, replacing a ceremonial parade with a community conversation. As service members and families assembled beneath the pavilion, Marcus took the stage. He recounted the fear he'd felt when base guards barred him from his son's graduation, and the solidarity 6 SEALs had brought without firing a shot. Respect is not merely a rule, he said, voice steady, but the bond that unites us. When we fail to honor one another, we fracture our own foundations. The crowd fell silent as he invited Colonel Beaumont to share his perspective. Beaumont described how the retired officer had stood composed in the face of hate, embodying dignity under fire. One by one, witnesses, veterans, contractors, and family members spoke. A young spouse, tears glistening, recounted how her husband endured microaggressions at the base gym. A teenage daughter described the fear she felt when discovering slurs scrawled near the playground. The contractor who'd instigated the clash sat listening, brow furrowed. The chaplain guided each speaker with empathy, asking what they needed to feel valued. Beyond apologies, attendees proposed tangible improvements: clearer signage for parking privileges, expanded outreach events, and multilingual notices to reflect the base's diverse community. Meanwhile, Petty Officer Daniels and Chief Solomon moved among veterans near the picnic tables, listening to stories of integration struggles from decades past. Solomon recounted his early days on a submarine, facing skepticism because of his background. His candor encouraged other sailors to voice regret for past insensitivities. These one-on-one exchanges built trust that rippled back to the pavilion, reinforcing that unity blossoms in everyday conversations as much as grand gestures. By late afternoon, transformation was evident. Service members who had glowered in crisp uniforms now queued for lemonade with families who once passed them in silence. The contractor approached the retired colonel, extended a hand, and offered a heartfelt apology. In return, the colonel clasped his hand firmly and invited him to join a memorial run scheduled for Veterans Day, a gesture of inclusion rooted in tradition. Cameras captured the moment, two men from opposing sides, smiling beneath the pavilion as the autumn sun glinted off its metal rafters. With the forum concluded, Marcus convened a briefing with Colonel Beaumont and senior staff. He recommended adopting Fort Bragg's quarterly inclusion audits, pairing units for cultural exchange events, and establishing a civilian liaison office for contractors and families. Beaumont pledged to send his security personnel to Fort Bragg's training sessions and to implement these measures immediately. Before departing, Marcus pinned a challenge coin to Beaumont's tunic, a token of trust passed from one leader to another. Late that evening, as Marcus lay awake in his quarters at Fort Liberty, he reflected on the day's arc. A moment of discord had become a catalyst for solidarity. He thought of his son, Ethan, and daughter, Sophia, hoping they would learn how conflict, when met with courage and compassion, can foster unity. The two SEALs returned from conversations with local enlisted personnel, excited to replicate the exercise across naval installations. The ripple effect Marcus had envisioned was steadily taking shape. In the pre-dawn hours on the journey home, Marcus stared through the windshield at the pines flanking the highway. He considered how a steadfast commitment to uphold one's values and to invite others into dialogue could drive change more effectively than any mandate. He resolved to formalize a rapid response protocol for bias incidents, ensuring that every base could convene a conversation within 72 hours of a complaint. His legacy, he realized, would not rest solely on medals or missions, but on every individual uplifted by respect and unity. Pulling into Fort Bragg's guardhouse at dawn, Marcus stepped into cool air kissed by first light. The pines whispered overhead. Pocketing the freshly earned challenge coin, he turned toward home and family, firm in the conviction that the fire of conflict, when guided by fidelity to our better selves, can forge unbreakable bonds of community, no matter where that community stands. He paused at the gate, reflecting that each sunrise offers another chance to heal divisions and strengthen the ties that unite service members and civilians alike. With that thought, he lifted the coin, a symbol of empathy and resolve, and stepped forward into the brightening day. Echoes of honor. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of the Holliday family home as Major Marcus Holliday sat at the breakfast table, reflecting on the journey that had transformed Fort Bragg. Around him, the hum of everyday life unfolded. His daughter Sophia arranging toast, Elaine reviewing briefing notes, and Ethan, cap still perched on his head, preparing for another day of leadership training. The aroma of coffee mingled with memories of milestones, graduation ceremonies, and moments when unity overcame division. Months earlier, a rigid protocol rule had nearly kept Marcus from his son's graduation. That moment of injustice became the spark for empathy, dialogue, and systemic reform. Uniform regulations evolved into frameworks of inclusion. Security officers embraced cultural competence. SEALs and special operators moved from silent guardians to ambassadors of unity. Workshops, exercises, and community dialogues replaced suspicion with understanding. Rules transformed from static guidelines into living commitments. Today, Marcus would lead a final ceremony before departing on a new command. As he donned his dress blues, each ribbon and medal seemed to hum with purpose. He paused to recall the faces of veterans who had shared their vulnerabilities, the cadets who had carried the flag in triumphant relay, and the families whose lives had been touched by open conversations. Checking the mirror, he saw not just a uniform, but a man who redefined tradition. He snapped a crisp salute to his reflection, then strode toward the parade ground. On the parade ground, families, veterans, and service members gathered beside the monument bearing 5 bronze reliefs: the graduation salute, the inclusion workshop, the joint exercise, the Fort Liberty dialogue, and today's reflection. At its center, "In unity we serve," Colonel Avery took the podium, recounting the milestones with vivid anecdotes. A guard officer's epiphany, a child's essay that inspired policy, a multinational exercise that bridged cultures. Marcus scanned the crowd. Former guards turned instructors, diversity officers, families once marginalized, all standing proud. Taking the podium, Marcus addressed the hush. A father's wish to honor his son evolved into a mission for us all. We learned that rules matter, but intent matters more. Every service member and family deserves respect. His voice resonated across the field. Today marks not an end, but a promise. To carry this commitment into every barracks, every deployment, and every home. Behind him, the rising sun glinted off polished brass and bronze, a silent affirmation of shared values. The crowd rose in applause. Ethan and Sophia joined him on the dais. Sophia presented a folded flag symbolizing their lineage of service. Ethan handed a plaque inscribed with his words. Pride isn't just earned, it's shared. Marcus accepted both gifts, heart full, eyes misting. In that moment, he felt the unbreakable bond of family and force united, a living testament to lessons learned and legacies upheld. A reception followed under canvas shelters. Fresh coffee, pastries, and lively conversation filled the air. Veterans shared how the initiative reshaped their units. Recruits spoke of joining a military that valued every voice. Officers discussed expanding online inclusion modules, hosting community events overseas, and mentoring mixed units. Local musicians performed a medley blending military hymns with cultural folk songs, symbolizing harmony. Children from military families painted banners reading "Respect," "Courage," and "Community." Amid the laughter and conversation, Marcus joined a circle of junior officers discussing challenges in remote postings. Captain Lee recounted how a simple video chat with family improved morale. Lieutenant Miller described applying inclusive dialogue techniques during patrol briefings. They credited the Fort Bragg model for enhancing trust in coalition operations. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, conversations turned to concrete plans. Joint humanitarian missions, diversity training exchanges, and cultural immersion visits. Weeks later, Fort Bragg implemented a mentorship program pairing seasoned officers with enlisted personnel from diverse backgrounds. The inaugural mentors, 2 former security guards, a SEAL veteran, and a diversity officer, led monthly sessions on leadership, ethics, and resilience. Survey results showed a 60% increase in reported morale and a 70% drop in discrimination complaints. The base had become a beacon, with other installations adapting its approach to local cultures and needs. A year later, Marcus received an invitation to Ethan's college ROTC commissioning ceremony. Watching his son pin on officer bars, Marcus recalled the journey from exclusion to inclusion. Sophia, now organizing a charity run for military families, handed him a commemorative coin inscribed with "Led with Honor." Elaine, by his side, captured the moment on her phone. A new generation honoring tradition through progress. Beyond American borders, word of Fort Bragg's transformation reached Allied forces in Europe, Asia, and the Pacific. Delegations from NATO bases requested case studies and training modules. Navy destroyers hosted inclusive ceremonies at sea. Air Force squadrons organized joint family outreach on remote bases. Each adaptation carried the essence of that pivotal graduation moment, proving that empathy and respect know no boundaries. Marcus envisioned a world where service meant solidarity across nations, cultures, and languages. That evening, the holidays gathered by the hearth. They spoke of futures bound by service and shared values. Ethan planned leadership seminars at his university. Sophia dreamed of bridging civilian and military communities through art. Elaine considered writing a guide on inclusive command. They raised glasses to new beginnings and whispered hopes for every generation that would wear the uniform with both pride and compassion. Before turning in, Marcus pinned a challenge coin from the ceremony onto his dresser. He whispered a benediction. May our service never be defined by uniform alone, but by the respect we extend, the unity we forge, and the courage we share. As the fire crackled, each spark rose like a promise, bright, enduring, free. In that moment, a father's stand became an anthem for an army united, echoing far beyond any parade ground and lighting the way for all who serve.